This is Moments with Mary, and I'm Mary McGrath, the Town Council. My guest today is Bill Wood, a resident of Bridgewater. Thank you, Bill, for being on my broadcast.
Thanks, Mary.
So how many years have you been were you a town councilor?
11 years and
11
9
years.
months.
I knew you were on a long time, so that's why I asked you, because the school budget's up, and a lot of people are confused, so I thought we could talk and just clear the different questions that we've heard people, especially after last night. We know a lot of the things that they're confused about. So I think the biggest thing that I heard from last night, and which was a surprise, is a lot of the kids that came up and talked, they talked a lot about how the disruption behavior of other kids in the classroom. So I don't know if that's because class size or, kids are just being more ruly today. They get away with more than we did.
Right. And I'm not sure if class size affects that or something else. But one of the things that was supposed to be done, and I don't know the status of it, is there was supposed to be a report on class sizes. So in the current teacher's contract, the collective bargaining agreement, there was supposed to be a committee formed, and they were supposed to meet twice and then produce a report. So when we talk about class size, from my opinion, I had 3 kids go through this system. Larger classes with maybe some disruption is a big problem. But you could also have smaller classes with disruption. So I don't know what the study would show. What is the proper class size?
Yeah.
When my kids were in school, it was about, the same as it is now, 28, 30. And the kids that did well, and the kids that didn't do well, didn't do well.
Yeah, that's true. I was just surprised because even the third grader that came up, she's talking about stuff, and she's right away talking about the disruptive behavior of the students in the class. So I know it's not our problem. We can't fix it, but I'd like to see maybe why, and we can help in areas.
Right. So with people staying in their lane, that's really probably more of a problem for the school committee to answer than the council.
Yeah. So the other thing, the school committee was saying that they got 200 kids the past 2 years.
So I looked at the enrollment figures. So when we did the override in 2010, there were approximately, if I recall, about 5,700 kids. And in the last 10 years, there was a decrease. And when I was on the council, I had conversations with Fred Clark, who at that point was VP External Affairs, I think. And he talked about the risk to BSU that the feeder systems, which are local high schools mostly, the enrollment overall in the community was dropping. And so if you look at the last 10 years, and I did this a couple weeks ago, if you look at the last 10 years, you can see that in the first 5 years, there's a decrease in enrollment. And then in 5 years, there's an increase in enrollment. And you've been in town for a while. So you can tie this to developments. So Magnolia Way, I think it's called.
Yeah.
It has about 75, 80 homes in it. And back when I first got on councilor, we actually tried to buy that property to stop the development of houses in there. And we were unsuccessful. So that went from wooded agricultural land into homes.
Yeah.
And if you look at Duxboro, you have a lot of homes built out there in the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And you have Viva coming online as an apartment building. I don't know how many kids are out there. In fact, if you ask the school, they won't tell you, which is probably the appropriate response because you have to protect where kids live. But I was just passing Meadow Lane, whatever it's called now, and I think high school has a half day today, and I watched 22 kids get off the bus.
Yeah.
So two things happened. One is there was a huge amount of housing development, which we have studies, and you can find these. I don't have one with me, but you can find studies that when a new home is built for the first 10 years, it costs the town more than the taxes it provides.
Because of schools.
Because of everything.
Yeah.
You add a new neighborhood, you might need to add a new firefighter or a new cop.
And
or
we
a new
take
ambulance.
over, when those cul-de-sacs, we actually take over the
Eventually.
taking care of the roads.
Right. And so there's a highway costs, ice and snow and that sort of thing too. So there's an elevation of cost on a new home, usually because of the you can say because of the children, but it's overall because of all services. And that won't recover to the point where now the taxes are covering more than that home for services until the kids are older. And we've seen that in neighborhoods around us. I use one as an example, Pheasant Lane down the street from me. When they built those homes out, every single house had kids. Every single kid is the same age as my kid, and they're all out of school. They're all mostly working the workforce. They're beyond college. So what you see in the older neighborhoods is a turnover from families that had many children to new families or older parents that hold on to their home without children in the school. So that's a big impact for the older neighborhoods. And I expect that over the years, these new developments, that'll happen too. And so,
but this is a huge impact that they have 100 kids in a year.
True. So you have, again, new housing coming online. Within the past couple of years, that has that impact.
I wonder.
But the final message here is that when looking at the numbers this year are no different than 2010. So even though we've added hundreds and hundreds of new homes, we haven't added thousands of new kids. We've added hundreds of kids, as you just pointed out, because family size has dropped from 6 to 4 to 2.
That's true.
And when you cycle out the home from a family of 4 to a family of 2, or the parents hold on to the home longer, that's when you see the taxes.
Well, then maybe planning should be connected with the town council or the school. Because the planning sees the houses that are coming in.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
then we could like plan ahead of time. So like I live on Plymouth Street and I went down Curve Street because some residents said they're knocking all this, trees down and stuff, and they're building 150 homes on Curve Street. So it would be nice like if we knew that ahead of time and say, hey, all these houses are going to be, they have like 4 bedrooms. So we can say, okay, we're going to have to budget, more kids are coming in. Is more homes coming in than how many kids are graduating and trying to look. So we're not stuck in this spot going, oh my gosh.
So the other thing to keep in mind is, and we studied this years ago, is the amount of open space that's left for homes. So you've got potentially, the Broad Street project at, I think it's 77 units. You've got the Perkins project at, I forgot what the number is, but it's over 100 units.
Yeah.
But those are the last really 2 big spots. Other than that, you're getting maybe, I don't know what's going off of Winter Street. I see some cuts there. I see a couple of houses on Whitman Street. I see a couple of houses here and there. You're getting the developers using the end of their properties, that they've held for 20, 30 years to build out.
I see a lot of cul-de-sacs, like on Plymouth Street, they push it out and they put a ton of houses back there. I think it's Pratt Town and a couple other things. So they get some pretty good houses in there.
But that cycle, like the cycle in the 90s that elevated the number of kids, will probably come to an end.
How about if with the accessory dwelling units? I mean, what if like a single dad and his kid or have 2 kids?
I mean, it's hard to predict.
I know.
Right?
So that's why I kind of like to see planning kind of, say, hey, we have a lot of projects coming up and just to keep an even keel. So the schools aren't all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, we got 100 kids.
Right. So as you and I had talked about this before, as a member of the town council, you need to have a comprehensive view.
Yeah.
You need to look at all aspects of it because, as we said before, and I think the number is still about 54%, education is a majority of the Bridgewater budget, right? Yeah. It's a majority of all budgets in municipalities, and that will never change. And part of that is the educational process for the kids, and that's operational expenses like teachers and custodians and administrators, things like that. And then part of that expense is the factory, building out the new building, like the new elementary school that we have, the BP school that'll come on in the next year or 2. And I think you heard last night, the taxes for that are still ahead of us, right? So we have a number of different tax things in addition. So from a town council's point of view, you have to keep a comprehensive view of what's going on because it all meshes together in the budget process. Yeah,
I do try to watch. I mostly watch all the planning and zoning and other stuff. like the next day, so then I can pause it and really look at it, you
Right.
know. But I guess I'm going to have to really start like charts because no one's doing it for me, so I'm going to have to do it.
Yeah.
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 I do have a question because this was a concern. So at one of the meetings, one of the school committee members stated that if an override fails, they could call a joint town meeting. So then at the joint town meeting, all the residents who show up will vote, and it's by whoever shows up that vote. It will force a town to actually pay for the money. And I know it's there because Pat, who's one of the, I think she's a selectman on the Rainham, she wrote up a letter and she wants the town councils and the selectmen to sign a thing that say if the override doesn't pass, they won't call a joint meeting. As our form of government, does that happen to us or just Rainham?
That's a good question. I haven't looked into that particular, but our form of government is different than Rainham's.
Yeah.
So Rainham still has the selectmen and the open town meeting form that we used to have, and we now have counselors. In the old process, if you had a district, if we were still selectmen and town meeting, yeah, I think that's true. Under this new form, you have legislative power for the town meeting, so I don't think that you can call a town meeting, and so you have to remember about the assessment. And I had a couple talking points last night about this. So the assessment from the school is a large number, and the town council has no ability to control what happens underneath that number. But that's not to say that the town council should not understand what's underneath that number. And then by law, you cannot give less than the year before.
Right. So
So-
we owe $1,543,000, I think, over. The state takes 20% of our revenue, right? That's what they look at.
So in the assessment for last year, and I don't have the number in front of me, but in this budget, I think it's going up by 4+% for the assessment in the current budget that you were presented with
Well,
last
the
night.
current bond we had is we're over because of what we have to pay. The state required. So it's $1,543,000 that it's over what we paid last year.
Correct. So the rule is you have to pay at least what you paid last year.
And then the extra
And
because
then-
we got more revenue, right?
And this is, right, an increase. And generally, and people say I never support the schools, but each and every year that I was on the council and each and every year that I participated in the budget, we gave approximately a 3% to 4% lift
yeah.
in the assessment.
No, you guys always over gave them.
Right.
Yeah, I saw that.
So it's not overgiving. Again, from the comprehensive view, 90+% of the employees of the town and the school are under collective bargaining agreements.
Yeah.
And the general form of a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, is a 3-year term. And so when you agree to a CBA for this year, you are committed to increases next year and the year after.
Because of their raises?
Yes.
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 Okay.
Because of
So-
the raises. And so when you multiply that by 600 employees, I think it's
Yeah.
about 400 on the school side and about 140 on our side, plus a few more.
But we have control on our side, right?
Once you commit to that contract, you've committed a 3-year revenue stream.
But I mean, for our employees, we negotiate.
Right.
But the school, who negotiates for the school against the union?
So it would be representatives of the school committee, form a board. I'm sure, could bring in other experts into it. But ultimately, it's a school committee and the superintendent that signs the contract.
I mean, that's kind of like an uneven fight, don't you think? Because the union's going to bring this real professional down because, I mean, they have the money. So could the town of Bridgewater and Rainham get together and hire someone, not saying that the superintendent and the school committee is not capable, but, I mean,
So this is the funny part about the structure, right? Because the town is responsible for educating the students.
Right.
But because we're in a district, the district is its own entity.
Yeah.
And because it's its own entity, it follows its own governance, right? So I know there was a committee formed to talk about a number of things. I encourage that. That's great. but we can't decide any points.
Yeah.
I was surprised when I first got onto the town council that I had absolutely no ability to manage the contracts or anything else on the school side.
So we would have to change our charter.
I don't even think it's that. It's probably the way the state law is set up with the district.
Oh.
So in other towns, they have schools underneath, but even in other towns where they have schools underneath, they still have a school committee. But
Yeah.
there's probably a little bit more control when you control the schools and the town together as opposed to
So I'm not
separate.
saying we would, but I looked into it. So the only power that we would have, in negotiating power with the school, is just give them what we're required by the state, and don't give them any above it unless they allow like our attorney to come in and negotiate, or that we can get a comprehensive budget.
Yeah. So
But
You know-
that would stop, think, bad blood between the two of
yeah,
us.
but the problem that presents is that almost automatically means layoffs. By giving the same amount. So let's go back
No,
to
I'm just saying the
Right.
threat of it.
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean?
Right,
Everyone
right.
says, well, if you don't do
But-
this,
Yeah. But the way the contracts work, again, the 3-year window,
yeah.
right? So I multiple times created forecasts about how much it's going to cost 2 and 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about level service, what it means is the same number of people doing the same number of jobs, but year to year that becomes more expensive each and every year because of the contract structure.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the grid that you talked about?
Sure. So if you, and it's public information, so you can look at, and I talk about the school, but the same thing is true for fire department, police department.
Oh, yeah.
In the town of Bridgewater, I think there's five unions or 6 unions.
6, yeah.
You've got fire department as one, police department as another. You've got it's called steel workers, but it's the administrative staff. You got the library. You've got the managers, and the managers formed their union back after we switched over to this form of
But
government.
our town has control over that because we hire the negotiator, and we'll say we won't go beyond this. So we have some say in the negotiation where the town council and us, who we have no
Right.
say in the negotiation between the union
Right.
and the school.
So typically in the town agreements, in the legal staff, town manager negotiates the contract. And what we did by practice, and I think it says this in the charter, but it's vague, but by practice what we said was, well, the town council is responsible for the budget. So we made it that all the contracts come before the town council to be ratified.
Yeah.
Right. So the council isn't negotiating anything. The town manager is negotiating.
Well, that's what I mean.
But the conversation between the council and the town manager should be, this is how much money we expect next year. So try to negotiate within that structure. And the other thing that makes it difficult, the town over the years, because of Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant, used to get grant money from that structure. We paid half the fire chief's salary and all the turnout coats for the fire department for new hires.
yeah.
Right, so that was about $4,000 per new hire, and half the salary of the fire chief. And for many years, we were also paying for, I think it was 8 firefighters through another grant. So all those came off I think they're all off the table now. So now the town is assuming all those costs
Yeah.
in addition to everything else. That's why, again, comprehensive view of what's happening everywhere is the way. So back to the grid. Your question about the grid. So if you look at any collective bargaining agreement, and we'll use the teachers because that's on the BR website and people can look it up. It's under, I think, school committee. For this year, it's a 1-year contract. Last year ended a 3-year contract. So when I said last night they're negotiating for a new one because this one expires either August or September timeframe. Within the 3-year structure, you will see 3 tables. And at the top of the table will be COLA adjustment. So that's a cost of living increase. And so it might say 2.5%, for example. Good years, it should probably all be 2.5%. So year after year, when you look at the cost of the numbers within the grid, they will increase from year 1 to year 2 by 2.5%.
They always get 2.5%.
No, That's a negotiated item. But it's an aggregate of everybody that's under that contract, right? So from year 1 to year 2, those numbers are elevated by 2.5%. I'm using 2.5% as an example. From year 2 to year 3, they're elevated by the COLA, let's say 2.5%. So each and every year, that contract grid gets more expensive by 2.5%. That's why if you don't give anything in the assessment, that alone causes a financial impact, negative financial impact, that your 2.5% is going to cost you more. Then within the grid, let's say you're a teacher, you've got a bachelor's degree, 7 years of experience.
Right.
As each year progresses, you also move up in salary from a 7-year experience to an 8-year experience to a 9-year experience. So I call this the Foursquare problem, like when we were kids and you played Foursquare on the playground, right? So it's a diagonal movement of costs. It's elevated by the COLA that is related to those grids, and it's elevated by the fact that each year a teacher gets more experience. And again, I'm using teachers, but this applies to basically all the contracts that Bridgewater uses. Each year, that teacher moves to a new position in the grid and gets more expensive. It gets a higher salary based on that. So when you look at the two combined as an aggregate for everybody in the under the agreement, I did an extensive, deep analysis back after the 2010. The next two contracts basically gave 5% overall aggregate, not individual teachers. But year over year, it was a 5% increase in salaries for the collective agreement. So when you're bringing in, again, comprehensive view of everything, when you're bringing in new revenue of 3.1%, and we say 3.1% because it's the 2.5% that the real estate can go up, plus its new growth. So you get about 3.1, depending what's happening elsewhere. If you bring in 3.1, but you give away 5, you run out of steam.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you say, well, we need another override.
Right. So how does their contract compare to like our police department?
So
I mean, is it even or do they get less?
So it's when you're negotiating, and I've never negotiated, so I'm just speaking from knowledge of others, but when you're negotiating a contract and the collective body can see what the other body got, they're going to be a little more hardline about what they expect. Yeah. So when they see extra money in the budget and they know that they need more personnel or, cost of living increase, something like that, it's going to get harder to negotiate, a reasonable rate on one ticket when the other ticket is enjoying a substantial increase.
So because I looked that up, so they also go by the masters, because I see at the police individuals they have the M or the B, so it talks about that, so it shows the rate. So they do the same thing. They get the cost of living, and then because so many years in what degree they have, they get a raise too?
Yeah, so there's EMT and paramedics, and they get rate differentials based on certification, and there may be other things. I haven't looked at their contract in a couple of years.
So that's why it's important that maybe, I don't know if we could ever get the same negotiator. We need to maybe help the school board or whoever does it to be a little bit tighter, because it affects not only our budget. If they're not negotiating and they're getting such a high raise, then it affects our police and our fire. Like, well, why are they getting it? We're not. Yeah. Kind of puts us in, a tough spot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know, Bo. I don't know. So
and the visibility is sometimes tough into the school. I had good responses. I won't say I didn't have good responses. I would ask for numbers. So like when I was doing the forecast, I would ask for not people and salaries, which are public information. I would ask for how many dots are within each grid of the square, so I would know where the population was relative to the numbers on
and where'd you get that information from?
The business office for BR.
They gave it to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you ever get like I'm sure you saw the budget that Mrs. Robinson presented. I mean, I think she did everything's so thorough and clear. So could we do that? Could we require that of the school?
Back when Lori's running the office now, back when Tony was running the office, I worked with him. He was an amazing financial person, and I think Lori is too. And that's why, there were a number of things put into practice that they've carried on, and I'm very happy to see that.
Yeah.
So some municipalities, when they're budgeting, they throw up their hand and they go, well, we're going to add $3 million and call it a day and split it up. There's no reality to what the revenue is going to be. So what we did in the beginning of the town council is we created a structure where we outline exactly what revenue we can expect. So real estate taxes are close to 100% expectation. The confidence level there is 100% because everyone pays the real estate tax. And for those that don't pay the real estate tax, there's another fund set aside in the assessor's office to represent that. Yeah. So that's near 100%. Permitting, you have to look at history, you have to look at economics, you have to look at where things are going. And so that can vary. That's not a huge amount of revenue, but it's a predictor.
Yeah.
New growth takes some time to come onto the balance sheet. So new growth of homes typically don't show up until the following January after they're completed and occupied. But you can predict how much is going to show up. So in December, if you start, you know what's going to show up in January for revenue. And then there's other big pieces like the excise tax. So Tony had created a formula, a huge formula. He could go out and get every single car that was being parked in Bridgewater and know whether it was leased or owned, how old it was, et cetera, and then use forecasts about, okay, so if the leases are going to get renewed, then we're going to get this amount of money because this is the renewal value. If this cars are going to get 1 year older because, there's a hard economic times and no one's getting a new car, we're going to see this. And for a while, we were worried that the excise tax, which is, I think it's around $3.5 million, would start dropping. Yeah. So $3.5 million on a budget of $74 million doesn't sound like much, but that represents 10 people.
Yeah.
Right.
So he would do this in December? So if I went into the finance and asked for all these, I could get them in December?
So when I was, you introduced me, but I was on the Budget and Finance Committee of the council. Every single year I was on the council. And my decision to join the council back in 2010 was because of the override, and I didn't want to see something like that happen again without good structure. I'm not saying I'm completely against that, but without good structure and without good knowledge. Because when we went to town meeting, there was nothing. There was no information. We were just picking a number. I saw some tricks done in town meeting that I never want to see repeated.
Yeah.
And so, that was a pretty bad financial time. My kids had lost all of the activities. We were paying for, music lessons. Even today, some of those things, I measure success in the music department when the orchestra comes back because they have a band, but they don't have an orchestra. So there's no strings. So we're only halfway there, right? And it's very difficult. But so we created a budget cycle that started in October with me writing the resolution that talked about what we were going to take off as a haircut.
What do you mean by that?
So if you look at the prior budget resolutions, even this one, I think, we set aside so you start with revenue.
And this is in October?
Right. So you start off with the expected revenue, and you say, we're going to take 1.5%, and we're going to say that the budget that the town manager needs to construct is 1.5% less than expected revenue. That's the simple form of it. In the beginning, we were very explicit as to how much growth to expect, how much real estate, but overall. So then, and I credit Tim Fitzgibbons with this, he put together a capital policy. And so in the cycle, when we have decent years, that 1.5% is not consumed by the budget. and becomes free cash. And he put together a free cash policy, Tim did.
Oh, okay, free cash.
And I encourage the council to look at that and review it and make sure you're happy with the way it's structured. So,
where would I get that?
well, ask.
At the finance?
Well, no, it's a published ordinance, so
Oh, okay,
know,
the ordinance.
yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
So you can ask your council clerk, and she should be able to find it for
oh,
you.
I can. I search for a lot of different ordinance on the website. So
It shouldn't be hidden. That's the most
it takes
frustrating
me a while.
piece for me
Yes.
as a technology manager to look at our website and go, there is information there that no one can find, no one can
No,
see.
it takes me.
And
'Cause
this is one of those.
you put the ordinance in, you don't know the number, but you know the year. I mean, it's just it's crazy.
Yeah.
It is.
So with the free cash policy and that
Right.
1%, 1.5% haircut, that automatically or should become free cash. Let's call it $1 million. And now the capital policy says, let's take that $1 million and let's shift it into these 5 accounts for capital planning. So we're not using operational funds to pay for boilers over at the high school. We're not using operational funds to pay for simple sidewalk repair. We're not using operational funds to do other things that are capital projects.
So that's you switch the free cash over to capital.
Yes. Yep.
See, I'm trying to learn as much because they don't. This is not really like when you come a council.
Right.
Is like, here's the budget, and you don't get it in depth. Because I find it frustrating. That's why I want to join it, because I try to piece it together. Like, where can I get that information? Yeah. Sometimes, I've asked for things at the school and have not always got them, but maybe I'm not asking for the right thing.
Right.
So now I know I will.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I started with, you can always ask for employees and their salaries, and then you can put that into the grid yourself. But it's easier since they know what step everybody is, just to tell you that they're a B7 or they're an M6,
Yeah, because once they do their budget, then I could start looking, okay, what are we going to need next year?
Right.
And that's
and
what I
by
want.
knowing what the contract says, you can anticipate what the raises are going to be and what that's going to cost. And then you can anticipate what are the revenues. So just to finish out the budget cycle. So in October, we'd put together the resolution. I think it's a very critical thing. It's a policy statement. In December, we always started the work of the budget so that by February, the town manager could have a preliminary budget released to the council. It may be off by $1 million, but at least you knew what the intention was going to be, right? So it's not the official. So last night you got the official budget. You've got 45 days. Vote it, don't vote it. After 45 days, it becomes fact, right?
Yeah.
And so by
so
having
this way we know what the revenue and the expenses are.
Right. By having a high participation rate back in the December, January, February, then everybody's aligned with things like how much money are you going to take from the ambulance receipts, right? Because that's part of the revenue stream, and it should be part of the revenue stream. But how much of the revenue stream has to tell a good story, right?
Yeah.
You have 5 ambulances. Each ambulance requires 2 crew. It requires this medical. So therefore, your operation is costing you $2.5 million. Therefore, the ambulance receipts, which is billed out to insurance, should be paying back into the town $2.5 million. That becomes your revenue. That's the type of,
I've been digging
pattern
into
we'd have.
that, just like, like I asked last night about the prison, because they weren't paying their ambulance bill.
Yeah.
But then she found out there's different here and there, and now she's starting to get that extra revenue. But at first, so I have looked at that. So this is the thing that I want to question, that this is based on how much you have to pay by the override.
Yeah. So I think Bled said average homeowner, and the thing that keyed for me was $2 increase. So we're at, what is our tax rate right now?
6.25, I think.
No, it's much higher than that.
Oh, no, I mean 11, isn't it? I was
Um,
thinking of something else that I looked at.
11.83 according to this.
Yeah, I was thinking about the other thing.
So an $11 million override would add, I think she said, $2 to that. So you don't need averages. You just go to your assessed value card on the assessor's map, and you multiply, you do the multiplication division, and you can figure out exactly how much that's going to cost you.
Okay, so say if I'm paying like $7,000 in cash, taxes a year. So what do I do with that?
So the residential rate is by 1,000. So divide that by 1,000. Divide your assessed value by 1,000.
7,000 by 1,000.
Well, that's your tax. That's your taxes.
Oh,
So
but people want to know how much their taxes are going to go up if we
Right.
do the override.
so let's say your house is $600,000,
Okay,
just as a number,
that's what it's valued at.
the assessed value. And
Okay.
taxes are on assessed value, not retail or market value.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the town hires professional assessors and goes through. We could spend another 3 hours talking about Proposition 2.5. We won't do that.
No.
But the mechanism here is you looked up your assessed rate. So on the town website, there's an assessor's page. On the assessor's page, there's search for property. Under property, you can find your property card. On the property card, it tells what the assessed rate is.
Yeah.
So 600,000, you divide by 1,000,
Okay.
and that gives you 600, right?
Right.
And then you take 600 and you multiply it by the tax rate, which is 11.83.
And that's my tax rate.
And that's the amount of tax that your home,
Right.
not your neighbor's home, or anybody else
Right.
could see. So what Blythe was saying was it would increase by $2 on top of that tax rate. So it'd be $13.83 times 600,
Oh.
and then you can find the difference.
And that's how much more I'd be paying.
That's how much more you'd be paying next year.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but I guess once you multiply all this.
So one of the points I made last night was an override changes the debt levy ceiling by the amount of $11 million.
Right.
And that amount continues to grow year over year by 2.5%.
Yeah. So I'm going to be paying 11 is my tax rate, plus next year it's going to be raised to 2.5, and plus my water's going up, and plus my sewer's going up.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. Comprehensive view. You need to look at everything and see how it all impacts.
I've been trying, Bill. I'm telling you, I just like
because the water and sewer, right, goes to the subscribers of those services.
Yeah.
And even me, I have a septic tank. I get it pumped. It goes down to the town. They charge to the vendor.
Yeah.
So
And the
increase
water.
rates.
That
And
you use.
there you go.
I don't know. It goes by fast. Huh?
Yes.
So I did look up. When I was looking up Chapter 71 and Section 16E, it says that regional school and district audits, we can do them.
I would expect they probably have an audit just like the town of Bridgewater has an audit.
Would they?
And so audits don't look for how money is used. Audits typically look for the process of that's used.
That's what I mean. I would like to have, it go through like the administrative, what's the cost, how much to raise, just like we have on ours, but we can't.
So I would encourage you to look at their line item budget.
So I can request all that, and
I think they've
Do they
already
have
posted
to?
that on their budget page.
all the line items
Yeah.
deep like she did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, on the
Their
BR
their,
webpage.
their webpage has been down.
Yeah.
So I looked because they said that they were doing their budgets and stuff, but I didn't see it, not at all. So I don't know.
Yeah, we used to, in the early years of the council, we used to always request their line item budget so we could see changes year over year of various costs.
Maybe I'll have to go through Deb and say that this town council wants it, because I did put in for it. But anyways, because have you ever looked like their school records, their reports? I mean, I look at them like we have, and some of them like 12.5% dropout rate in the seniors. Half the ninth graders can't pass.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I would like I know they do like a school's student successful plan, but we can't see that, can we? Can we request that?
Yeah, I think you can. I think.
if they do
I mean, to be fair, I think they're fairly transparent
Yeah.
in all the things that they handle. So yeah, make a request.
Well, like you said, there's two. we don't have the authority. We just ask, and if they
Right.
choose to do it.
Right.
Okay, that's what I was
Right.
wondering. Was he knocking on the door?
I think so.
All right. So I guess we'll have to continue it another time. But I learned a lot, Bill, and I appreciate it. And I think it would be nice that when a new council comes on, we have a workshop about, the finances rather than trying to learn everything yourself.
Yeah.
It would be.
Yeah. Yep.
But like this time coming along, I mean, the first time that I saw the override was Friday when I got my package.
And that's unfair to
And
everybody,
that's an
including
issue.
you.
Yeah.
That's
I
a
wasn't
huge
happy.
issue. That should have been part of a strategic discussion.
Yep.
And just as we're wrapping up here, Finance Committee, if anybody out there wants to volunteer for the Finance Committee, I'm kind of done with committees for right now, but
Yeah.
it's an awesome committee. It needs to be proactive, and they need to be the one that recommends that, it makes sense to have an override. And this is what, the number that makes sense. And
Yeah,
then
'cause they're
and
having
then,
trouble getting a quorum every
and
time
then
we meet
prove
with
it
them.
out, show the numbers and
Yeah.
show that, if we invest another $1 million, that our student success rate will elevate by 4 percentage points or whatever it is,
Yeah. I definitely have to be more active, even with the town manager, the new one that's coming in.
Yeah.
Meet and I know I can request like the revenue and expenses for the month.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna.
Budget and finance, we used to have meetings regularly with department heads to talk about their needs. You can't satisfy all needs. It's impossible. You just don't have enough
So
money.
did you have to go through the town manager to ask that you could speak to our town department head?
You know what?
Yeah.
I never had a problem with that.
Okay.
I never had a problem with that.
All right.
And I would often, if I was making a request, I'd say, I need to talk to the police chief about this policy for this thing. And the
So as
town
long as
manager
you're
would
up
go,
front, it was
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll give that a try. But I really appreciate you coming on. Maybe you'll come back after we struggle some more with this override.
Sure, because let me make this final comment. If the strategy is to do the override and the override fails,
Yeah.
you are in a world of hurt.
Yeah.
If the override succeeds and you have all these other costs in addition to that, you are in not a good financial place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't see doing an override with it just, if we have to do with the basic with the school and maybe plus with some of the employees that we need.
Yep.
But, well, whatever happens, maybe, the town council will hire you and bring you in.
That'd be great.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it.
All right.
Anytime
Anytime.
you want to come back, you let me know, okay?
All right. Thank
All
you.
right. Bye.